Katy Woessner, how is your life?
How is my life? My life is it's really good. It's been a journey, but I wouldn't give up any part of it. But it's been a journey.
Do you ever wonder how you got where you are today from when we left Coral Gables Senior High in 1983?
Yes, I do because I went off to college. First of all, I wanted to go as far away as possible, and my parents were like, "You can't go west of the Mason-Dixon line." So I went to Vermont. To just, get something totally different than growing up in Miami. And I was bound and determined because I don't know if you know, but all my family are scientists. My mother's got a degree in botany. My dad was a biochemistry professor at the medical school. My brother's a molecular geneticist. And I'm like, I'm going to go off and I am going to be an English major. So I went off to Middlebury College, and I was definitely like a fish out of water in Middlebury at first, but it ended up being like the most amazing 4 years. But at the end, there was that siren song of science. And so I ended up still going to medical school despite my best efforts to buck that family tradition.
How did you wind up deciding, okay, I'll go to medical school? Was it overnight or was it just, this really is the right thing for me?
Yeah, because I think I have my dad's sense of realism too, and the reality was is maybe I wouldn't be able to have a successful career in being like an English major. I think I also had no precedent of anybody that I was close with that had been an English major and then made something of their life. But I just really loved science. And then medical school seemed like a good option. I'm a big social. I really like hanging out with people and interacting with people and learning what makes them tick, and then like figuring out how it all works on the inside. Just seemed like a natural fit. Although I will say that medical school um, was somewhat of a disappointment after undergrad at Middlebury, where, I think my biggest class had maybe 12, 15 students in it, right? And then you get to medical school. And it was a little daunting because my dad was a professor I went to the University of Miami, and my dad was a professor. And you stay in the classroom and then the professors change, right? So we never left the classroom your first year. And I told my dad, I'm like, listen, nobody knows you're my father. Like, I'm just sitting here in the back of the classroom being cool. So he walks in to teach biochemistry, and the first thing he says is, "Hi, I'm Katie's dad." And I just about died.
You must enjoy your work or else you wouldn't do it.
No, I love what I do. I ended up doing allergy and immunology, which they didn't even have at the University of Miami. And so I did a year when I finished my internal medicine residency. It was right at the height of the HIV epidemic. And at the county hospital in Miami at Jackson, the medical teams were just being overwhelmed with patients that basically had no immune system, right? So we set up like this multidisciplinary team to take care of these patients. And then I realized, gosh, we don't even have an immunologist here. I'll go off and do my immunology fellowship and then I'll come back. And then I came out to California, to San Diego. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not leaving.
You've been in California, what, 40 or 30 plus years?
Yeah, since like the mid 90s.
What is it about California that keeps you there?
So that's easy. When I came to San Diego, it was all the outdoor stuff. So you can be on the beach, you can go hiking, you can go mountain biking. And I had started mountain biking in Miami in the Everglades, dodging alligators, and then came out to San Diego. And like literally within the town, there's mountain bike trails through the canyons, and you can ride 40, 50 miles without going on any roads.
Mhm.
And it was all over at that point. And maybe the lack of humidity and cockroaches was another selling point.
Only something true Miamians can appreciate. So, what surprises you about the person that you are today versus the person you thought you would be? So, if you go back so many years.
Yeah, so I think the thing that surprises me the most was that I had planned, I don't know, I was probably 10 when I decided I was never going to get married. I was never going to have kids. I was going to, do my thing. And then I met someone when I was out here who had four young children. I think the young Christopher was the youngest at the time, and he was five. And so we got together, and then all of a sudden I had four children, right? And that was crazy, and like probably the best thing that happened, because those children are still a part of my life now and they're all grown up. It didn't make me want to have my own kids, but having that opportunity, that was a game changer for me.
I want to ask you about that. You say
Yeah.
you were 10 years old and you knew you did not want to have your own biological children?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was, I'm not going to blame my mother, but she was, working and trying to balance having kids and this whole myth that you can have it all. I think I realized really early on that you really can't, you can have it all, but not all at the same time.
You remember there was this TV ad when you and I were kids. I think it was for a woman's perfume, Anjali, and she would sing, "I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never ever let you forget you're a man." And it was basically, you can have it all. And
Yeah.
you just said that no, you can't have it all.
It's like virtually impossible. I mean, I don't think anybody can have it all. I mean, maybe if you have like a full staff, but then are you really having it? And I think if you have kids and you knew like right when you're about to lose your mind, they're going to their mother's house and you're like, okay, I can do this, right?
You got a break.
Yeah.
Was there though, did you ever experience stigma or negative reaction from people over your choice not to have biological children?
I don't think I had any friends that thought it was odd. So yeah.
It was
I
just the
think
way
they
it
all
was.
thought I was a little bit crazy when I all of a sudden had four four stepchildren.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Now, the relationship with their father, that came to an end, right?
that came to an end. I'm over this now, this period in my life where I was not really good at figuring people out and then just kind of putting up with things. And so he and I never got married, but we were together for 10 years. And I'm just as close to the children now as I was back then. So then I vowed that never again would I do that. And then and I was never going to get married, right? That was also part of the never having kids. And then I met someone who was like, no, we need to get married and it'll be perfect. And I'm like, I'm still not having kids. Um, and so that relationship ended in the same way with the having been cheated on. So that was a little bit devastating, but it taught me that those two relationships taught me how important family and friends are, because like at my darkest moment I had like my best friend like came right over and he's like, come on, we're going, and come stay at our house. And I think you learn what's really important in life, and it's not the things and it's not the house and the perfect partner, it's the friends that you've made along the way.
I was curious when you were talking about that. How did you get through that heartache? You had the support of your friend, but how'd you get through that breakup or the two breakups?
Well, the first one I think was easier because that relationship had run its course. But the when I made that commitment to get married, I was like, I was all in, and that was going to be, like you work through things, and I never even got a chance to work through any. I mean, we never had a discussion. It was just like literally one day here, the next day gone. And I'm like, this is like a soap opera. Why am I living a soap opera, right? Um, but I think it set me on this journey, and I don't know, that may have also been a factor of age too, because I think we get a little bit more reflective when you realize that maybe you don't have as much time left anymore. But it really sent me on this journey of like really figuring out who I was. And I will tell you, between undergrad and medical school and residency and then doing my fellowship and trying to get all the awards and being the best at this and the best at that, I didn't have any time to think about like what am I feeling. I like so at 50, how old was I when we split up? 50, when we got divorced, I was 57. So all of a sudden it's like you're feeling all these feelings and I'm like, wow, like I don't even know what these feelings are, right? So that set me on this journey of like self-discovery and figuring out who I am. And now I just am like super excited in my own skin. And if I don't meet someone, I think I'll be just fine, right? But that was, I don't know that I would recommend that as the best way to get on that journey, right? But I think at the end of the day, that was the gift from this last relationship. My last relationship, it was having the kids, and they're still a big part of my life. But this one was actually like giving me a chance to get to know me, which was something I had always just been, whatever I think anybody ever wanted me to be, right? And so, like on paper, I had this perfect life, and then you realize, who is this person that's living this life? We're human, we need other people, and you just don't realize that because you think, well, I can do this on my own. I have, my partner, and I got my job. And so I think figuring out just how important the little moments are. It's not the big moments like, the big parties and the big events. It's the, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee, or let's go ride our bikes for 40 miles in the back country and, see what happens, right?
Yeah. Do you ever get worried about being single the rest of your life? Not having someone. I mean, we talk in terms of like the special relationship or the committed relationship with somebody. Do you think about that, going
No,
forward?
yes, a lot. I mean, I would really like a life partner, but I'm not willing to give up myself again for that. And so I think there's someone out there. I have a lot of optimism for that. I mean, I think the media will tell you the opposite, right? Like I'm gonna be 60 next year. You're like old, you're like over the hill, you're never gonna meet anybody, and I don't accept that. I do think I'll meet someone. I've met it's been interesting. I'm on the dating apps, and some of those adventures have been really interesting. I mean, it makes for good cocktail party discussions, but I still have hope that
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 I will, and then I feel like I'm like I have so much more to offer in a relationship now, because I'm not gonna try to mirror what I think someone else wants, but I mean, I know who I am, and so I feel like I have so much more to give at this point.
have you always looked at life as a journey, or did that develop as you got older?
I think I've always looked at it as an adventure. So I think I've always been pretty quick to say yes, particularly to things that are going to make me uncomfortable or like outside of my comfort zone. But I don't really I literally think from my 20s to my maybe mid 40s, it's all kind of a blur. Like I think, we're just so busy trying to achieve all the things that we're supposed to achieve. Like I, again, I don't even think I knew I mean, maybe if I go back to myself, then I think I knew everything, right? But I don't think I really knew myself. And I don't know. That's why I keep asking my friends too, like, is this, is this just what happens as you get older? And our parents never talked about it, right? Like, oh, good gosh, if you talked about feelings with my parents, they probably like cringe and sink into the couch or something.
It was at the divorce where you started asking, "Who am I?" Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Well,
And
I think it started a little bit before that because we're in the middle of it was like right at the early days of the pandemic.
mhm.
And I was still going to work then, right? Like, so you're going into the hospital. You don't know, we didn't know how bad San Diego was going to be hit. And the whole world is spinning off of its axis, right? And then, so I think that may have already started the process, but then to find out that someone was having an affair in the early days of the pandemic, which is a whole nother thing. I'm like, how
That's
did you
talent.
even
How do you do that
that,
with a
right?
mask?
Yeah, how did that even happen? No, and so yeah, so I think that was like the start of it because all of a sudden everything that you had accepted for how things were going to be like spun off its axis with the pandemic.
I think it takes a lot of strength. And I think every person, God willing, walking this planet has the strength within themselves, if they're willing to, ask that question about, okay, what is it about me? What makes me tick? And you ask that question, but that's not easy to do. People don't just, wake up one morning and say, I'm going to do this.
You learn some nice, not so nice things about yourself, right? I mean, I think I mean, you have to be willing to be like, okay, if I'm going to figure out who I am, I need to kind of know all of me, right? And that can be a little daunting, right? Because you have this image, or I had this image like that I projected to the world of, really smart allergist and immunologist, the head of the division, yada yada yada. And then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, but I still don't even know what all my feelings are, right? It's like so that was a process.
Were you scared during that process or were you more in wonderment?
I think both. Because you really just didn't know, like, some days you would be like, wow, this is so cool. And then the next day you're like, all right, I'm done feeling these feelings. I want to go
Yeah.
back to like life is fine, just living it on the surface. Um, yeah.
the I think the way I've heard other people describe it too is that look, all of us come from a background. None of it's easy for anybody, even if it's supposedly easy. The question is, okay, what do you do with it?
Right. Yeah. What
When
do you do with it? And I mean, yeah, so you could blame, oh, well, my parents didn't do X, Y, or Z, and that's why I shoved all my feelings deep down into my stomach so that I wouldn't have to feel them, right? But that's, okay, so you recognize that, now you have this choice. Do you keep doing that and blame your parents and then, not live your life,
Yeah, well,
right?
I remember having a discussion with a friend. Oh, this has to be about 10 years ago. And he was going on with the things I think all of us, I think there's certain themes that all of us have when we look at parents. It's like, oh, this happened or that happened and blah, blah. And it occurred to me and I said, yeah, okay, but you're an adult and you're aware of that. Now what?
Right. Now what, right?
Because you love your parents. You don't have to, by the way. There's nothing that
Yeah.
says you have to honor them if you believe in religion and all of that, but you don't have to love them. And so now what are you going to do with it? And that's when I hear you talking about the journey you had, it sounds to me like you looked at yourself and said, okay, now what am I going to do with me?
Yeah. Let's get to a me that I love. So that was hard. I mean, like, because then I think because I started meditating, and I think one of the first things that I realized when I was meditating is like my self talk was like insane, right?
The Buddhists call it the 10,000 voices.
I was like, holy smoke, you are not very nice. I just wish like we had been equipped with some of this knowledge when we're younger. I mean, I think I'm hoping now, like with my kids and we have our first grandchild, like that it's okay to feel these things and you don't have to beat yourself up, right? Like we're just so hard on ourselves.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there's some mistaken belief that if you're not hard on yourself, you're not going to achieve anything. You're going to be some schmo that's sitting on the couch eating bonbons all day and never accomplishing anything, right? But we know from science that that's not the case, right? Like you need to water and feed and nurture for a good outcome. So I don't know. I think for me, like for kids today, like having all this social media and all this expectations to have like the perfect existence is just, I am very glad that we did not have social media when we were.
Amen. I celebrate that with you. We're the last generation to not have that, and we know how to use a dial phone. But yeah,
No, but I mean, you think about like we would go and ride like I had to be home at, when the church bells rang, right? Our parents had no idea where we were, right? And
right.
there's no photographic evidence of anything
Yep.
that we did,
To
right?
haunt you. There was the permanent, remember, I think kindergarten or first grade, this is your permanent record. It'll follow you. That was it. It's a file lost in the Dade County system somewhere. Ageism. I used to have friends say to me, as you get older, certain things will become harder. And they were talking physically. And
Yeah,
I didn't listen to them. They were older friends.
yeah, yeah,
And now I'm there and I'm like, oh yeah, I see that. The doors that used to open without any effort don't open.
yeah.
And I would imagine it's just it's I watch it as if I'm out of my body now. And I look at these things because we are at that point where I think we're older than the majority, than the rest of the
Yeah.
population, where the majority of people here are younger than us. And sometimes I marvel what would their lives be like. But then we're not done. We still got a
We're not,
lot
we got
to
a lot, we got a lot, we
contribute.
got a lot going on. No,
Yeah.
I think it's a double whammy too for women, right? Because all of a sudden we become kind of invisible in some ways. Um, and then I live in Southern California where everybody's all about, you know, being perfect and Botoxed and filler, and I have yet to go down that route. I might, but I haven't. And so I just think and you can see it, I think to your point, you can see it in subtle ways. So I look at one of my partners who he's probably like 12 years younger than me. And I see all we both still get invited to talk all the time, but my number of invites is going down while his is going up, right? And so you begin to see things like that.
The the double standard for women that you just talked about. I have a friend, a colleague, and I hear stories about what it was like when she was younger, coming up. And I can't believe that these things happened to her. And they're right out of the stereotypical, you see it on TV.
Yeah.
Um, Another colleague, I won't say too much because someone died recently. The individual who died is thought of very well and all of that, but I know some things about the individual and how that individual treated my colleague. And it just blows me away because and it was happening, I guess, in front of us and we didn't see it. And it still happens today, and that still blows me away.
No, it's still I think certain professions, so medicine being one of them, it's still a very male dominated world, even though there's more women in med school classes now than there are
Mhm.
men, right? But the the and people never retire in medicine, so we have a lot of people that are, in their 70s and 80s that are still, in the academic world. And I mean, I still have where people, particularly if you're speaking internationally, where, and I'm like, okay, this may be kind of a societal thing, but that they'll just cut you off in the middle of a sentence to have ask a man the same question. And I was like, you literally got me here because I'm one of the world's experts on this topic. And yet you're going to ask someone that literally has seen, only a few patients with it, right? And that to me to me that's just always so astounding, but it still happens all the time.
When it happens to you, does it hurt? Does it make you angry? How do you react?
So it makes me angry. Um, and then in my usual response would be like I just back off and let it be. But then I've gotten to the point now where I feel like you need to call it out, not in a really rude way, but that because otherwise it never changes, right? I mean, I've been at a meeting where someone will be like, "Sweetie, so what do you think?" And I'm like, "You would never in a million years call my male colleague sweetie," right? Like, so it just automatically is like it knocks you down a couple of notches. So I always be like, that would be Dr. Wessner for you, you know? But
Yeah.
it's just, it's just, yeah. So I'm a woman of great hope. I think it has to change. And it almost to me feels like it's kind of like this last gasp of like, we'll go back to the good old days. And when you actually look at the good old days, they weren't all that good. Um, and I get so encouraged because I see, um, like, because as an allergist, I get to see, from a baby to, a 92-year-old. So I see a lot of high school age young adults and they're so phenomenal. Like I have this, like they could care less about what your gender orientation is, and they're just focused on who people are and not what labels they have attached to them. So I have hope. The thing that worries me, or are we leaving the certain demographics behind now, right? Like, so
Yeah.
we've decimated our education system. So, like, if you can't get a good education, how are you going to have a, a chance for a future? And then that's perfect fodder to have, someone come in and say, well, it's not your fault that you don't have a good education. It's these,
Other people.
people from other
Yeah.
that aren't like you that are taking it away from you. So I go back. I'm like kind of polarized on that. But when I talk to youth like us when we were in high school and so idealistic that it gives you hope.
You talked about a few minutes ago, 20 to 40 seems like a blur. I think every generation probably experiences that. I sometimes wonder, whoa, how did we get here? What happened?
Yeah,
Can we rewind? How often do you experience that?
I think I see that not infrequently because I have a really dear friend. She was the secretary for the allergy division from the time I was a fellow, and she would always go home and tell her husband about me. And Katie, our fellow, so he thought my name was Katie Othello. So to this day, he still calls me Katie Othello just as a joke. But so she has a memory like nobody else. And so she could remember all these events that happened to me, like bad things and good things. And I'm like, gosh, I don't even remember that until you brought it up. Right. And so I just think we were so busy getting to the next thing that we didn't really take the time to enjoy the thing we had right at that time.
My I don't know if you remember my older brother John, but
Yeah.
he left the corporate world. He got a degree in happiness, actually, positive psychology. And
Yeah.
one of the keys to being happy, happiness is a choice. Assuming that you have certain things in place, your health, you have to have friends, not necessarily family, but
Yeah.
people, and you have to have community. And then you can choose happiness, but it's also your expectations have to be realistic. Setting the expectations, which is I think Oprah used to talk about gratitude. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. And what Johnny will say is when you see people who go buy the new Ferrari and then go buy the new Learjet, they're happy for 30 days. It brings them happiness, but then what? Because they keep raising the expectation of what will make them happy. And when you reset your baseline expectations, that's when you can then choose happiness.
Yeah, and I think because you can't get yourself to happy with circumstances, right? Like it's how you deal with you could change the circumstance. You could, become the CEO of, some biotech company, but if you still haven't dealt with who you are, it doesn't matter how many times you change the
Mhm.
circumstance. You still have to be able, it's your thoughts that then create your feelings that then you can enjoy it or not enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
And I
So,
think that was part of what we had been fed, right? Like if you just get this degree or you graduate top in your class or you just and then you'll be happy. And then that's a bunch of malarkey, right?
does anyone say malarkey anymore? I think people say bullshit.
Yeah, well, yeah, probably bullshit, but yes, right?
Can you share with me, if you're comfortable, one of the moments when you were examining who you are, when you realized, oh, wow, the discovery, when you discovered a characteristic about you that you really love or embrace?
Um, I think it went back to what you were saying about like how I have like this network of friends now, because I think I was always so focused on being whatever I thought I was supposed to be, that I didn't really take the time to nurture those friendships. And now I find that I'm like, God, I have like the most amazing friends, and like I think they were there for the long haul, but like I never really got to know them, right? Like, because you're busy with life. And I think learning that I can be a really good friend to them back was really an amazing discovery. And that's like the secret sauce to life. Like nobody tells you that, right? Yeah, do you like until you're giving of yourself, like it's kind of empty.
You know, uh, I do have to ask you, because I'm in a relationship of 12 years. What's it like to date at our age?
Okay, so for one thing, we all are a little bit quirky, right? And now you've had that for 60 years or however. I think for me, the hardest thing has been that people are not necessarily truthful on their dating profiles, which I'm sure would come as a shock, right? But they list their age as 60, and then you get there and you're like, you're clearly not 60, and you're like, oh my God. And then you're like a grumpy old man on top of it. I was like, what are you thinking? But they all want someone who's 20 or 30 years younger. But then I've met some really genuine people. We didn't hit it off, but like to learn like their life story. I mean, like that's the thing. We've all lived these lives now. And so the people that I have found the most interesting are the ones that can be like, okay, yeah, I had this horrible thing happen to me, but here's what I learned from it. And, look at where I am now, right? Where you have that capacity for growth. And I think that that's one of life's great pleasures is that, and growth is not easy, right? It sucks sometimes. Um, but it did so I take this phase of dating as a period of growth. But it also shapes like what you like, because now there's not this, I don't need a relationship to meet like whatever society ideal is or what have you, but that like now I'm going to retire. I don't know when I'm going to retire, but probably in the not too distant future. And you still have a life to live. And what are you going to do with it? Right.
Have you thought what are you going to do with it?
Well, besides ride my bike all the time.
Yes.
No, I know, like one of my dreams is like one of these pie in the sky dreams, but I always wanted to have like a little bike shop that was Katie's Bikes and Buns, because I would have like a little bakery. So I love to bake. So I'd have a little bakery and you would come in and you could have your espresso and I would tell you where to ride your bike. And then I would close up shop because I'm going to go ride my bike. No, I don't know. I haven't figured out that the next act.
Is there something now about you that you don't like that you accept or that you're trying to change that you would share?
Um, yeah, I still think that, and I catch myself doing it. I still find myself in this comparing, like, you know, whether it's a work related thing or how come that person got chosen to do, you know, do that talk and why wasn't I chosen? And then you're like, okay, well, it like, so I still have that kind of pettiness that kind of drives me nuts that I still care that much about these things. And I think that's always been like, oh, I'm fine with just the way things are. I don't need, validation or whatever, but I think I still need that validation. So that's something I'm still working on.
What's something about you that you really like that you'd be willing to share with us?
I really like, I am willing to, I can suffer. I think that's what mountain biking has taught me is that like, because I'll literally go and ride my bike. We did a ride on Friday. We were out there for 6.5 hours and didn't see anybody else. Did 4 or 5 thousand feet of climbing. And I can keep like I know that I can do really hard things. And I think mountain biking has taught me that over the years. And I think that actually what got me through even my divorce was that I'm like, I can do hard things, right? Like, the suffering will come to an end at some point and it there's some beauty that comes out of it. So when I'm mountain biking, it's like this amazing, I'm like in the most amazing places because nobody else is out there because they think you're crazy, right? But you got to see these things that hardly anybody gets to see. And I think that that's how it's helped me shape my I guess I'm gonna call it my awakened self.
Well,
That
let-
that that these hard things are what life is, right?
I can't imagine the pain that you went through with that whole process. I've learned your partner cheated on you.
Yeah.
I'm getting that. How does someone get through that?
Well, you do hard things, right? Like it was you have two choices. One, you can wallow in it, right? And replay things and you can't change anything, right? So it is what it is. And to me, I took it as an opportunity to be like, okay, it wasn't clearly there was a lack of communication in this relationship. So if I'm going to go forward, I want someone that I can communicate with. And then to be able to communicate, you have to know what you want and what your feelings are. So I think that really drove that whole growth cycle
Mhm.
and knowing that I'm not going to die if I have a feeling that yeah, so that's allowed me to come out the other side. And I will say too, like just having like friends that were like would just sit there and let me cry, right? Like that was everything. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to take the time to figure out who you are, which is hard when you're, just starting out in a career and you're trying to economically buy a house or whatever you're trying to do. But it at the end of the day, you you're the person that's with you your whole life, right? And so if you don't know who that person is and you don't like that person, like you're gonna have a hard it's a long journey with not knowing who you are.